Hello and welcome to Applicata Biblia. My name is Mark. Thank you so much for stopping by. As we get a little bit into God's Word, we are in the book of John and we are going to be looking at chapter 11. Now we're getting really close to a pivotal chapter, which is the next chapter. And after we hit that, we're going to kind of look at a review and see the progression of how Jesus lived his life and how he gets to where he gets in the last phase of that story. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. We're not going to read it. I'm assuming you've got a Bible. You can look at it. I'm going to retell the story and just give you a couple of key insights that I think I'm looking at, and maybe you have some of your own. Okay, we're going to look at verses 1 through 7 first. Now, the key words here that I see is sickness, glory of God, Son of God, be glorified. So this is a story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And of course, as is the case for all of his miracles, it's so it will help them understand that he's from God's. It's so that it will bolster their faith, and so that those are the two main things. And from what we've seen, that's really it. It's to help people with their faith and to show Jesus is God himself, actually. So in this chapter, it opens with a report coming to Jesus and his disciples that a friend is near death with sickness. His name is Lazarus. Now, Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha, are personal friends of Jesus. And when Jesus hears of Lazarus being sick, he states, "It is not a sickness unto death, but for the glory of God and of himself." Then, in lieu of rushing to the side of Lazarus, Jesus stays where he is for 2 more days. And then eventually he says, okay, let's go. Verses 8 through 16. So the key words and phrases here that I'm seeing is seeking to stone you. So Jesus has suggested that they go down to Bethany, which is near where they were already. And a statement made by Thomas, I think, is important. He says that we may die with him, and the word believe. I think these are all key phrases that show us sort of the drama that's going on at this moment. Now, Jesus has said they're going through the same place, Jerusalem, where the officials were looking to execute him. They're not going to Jerusalem, but they will have to go through there to get to their destination. Now, his disciples are concerned with that plan. They remind Jesus of the danger. I think they're trying to dissuade the idea. Jesus, we all know they want to execute you. Is that a good idea? So Jesus replies with an he replies allegorically that the time to go is now. He talks about the time to do things is in the day. This is the light. It's the time to go. Then he says Lazarus has fallen asleep. Now the disciples argue that if he only fell asleep, then he'll be okay. And then Jesus clarifies, no, Lazarus is dead. And Jesus says that he rejoices over this moment because it will help bolster their faith, right? This is every chapter. It will help their belief since he was not there, right? Since he wasn't there and these things have happened. So what is Jesus saying? Is he happy that their friend is dead? Well, in a word, no. First, Jesus is God, and this is something that we have to realize whenever we're talking about him. He views physical death differently than us. It is not a final act. It is more of a transition. He calls it sleep in this instance because he knew he would raise Lazarus. So this perceived death is only temporary, like sleep. And when we think about it, and Jesus is speaking more broadly about death, that this death is temporary. We're transitioning into another dimension, another realm, if you will. And then maybe we will die there as well, and we can talk about heaven and hell at another time. That's not part of this chapter. But that's kind of what he's trying to address here. Again, he's addressing the spiritual nature of who we are. Now, Jesus knows all of these things. He is God. Now, secondly, we will see that Lazarus is 4 days dead when Jesus shows up. This 2-day waiting around thing would not have really mattered much because Jesus was off at least a day's journey. He was so close to death, it would have mattered anyway. So he was dead about the same time that Jesus heard of his illness, maybe a day later. So the extra 2 days will intensify the power of this miracle and thus have a more powerful effect on the belief of the disciples. Now, when I read this book, I kind of put the first 2 verses, the first 2 chapters as Jesus trying to help his disciples believe, but all the miracles are helping the disciples' faith, right? They believe, but what it does is it improves and it empowers their faith even more. So after Jesus is saying all these things, we're going to go through Jerusalem and go down to Bethany. We see Thomas speak up and he says, "Oh, let's go, even we, that we may die with him." So there's a lot of debate as to the motivation of Thomas's word. Is he smiling when he says this? Or was he a little more sarcastic maybe? Was he saying, "Oh, where we go where you go, and if we die, we die"? I mean, was he being like that? Was he just saying, "We're going to die with you, Jesus, I don't care"? Was he saying that? Or was he being more sarcastic? Was he saying, "Oh, sure, here's the guy who can raise the dead and heal people, and he disappears and reappears all over the place. And we've seen all this, but he's asking us to put ourselves in a certain death situation." Was he saying, "Thanks a lot, Jesus," sarcastically? We're just regular humans. I don't know. I don't think he would have done that. I don't think he would have disrespected Jesus. But I do think he was trying to point out the gravity of what was going on at that moment. If Jesus was going to die, this is important that we see what they're thinking. They're thinking, or at least Thomas is thinking, we're going to die with him. This doesn't sound like a good idea. And it's important to see that because the last Passover is coming up in a couple of chapters. Okay, 17 through 29. Now the key phrases I see here and words are, "My brother would not be dead." That's Martha speaking. And Mary says the same thing. Jesus says, "Your brother will rise again." And then there's a discussion, and he says, "I am." Again, there's an "I am" statement, the resurrection and the life. Now, Jesus and the disciples traveled to Bethany. Again, they had to go through Jerusalem pretty much. It's like less than 2 miles away. It's pretty close from Jerusalem. But they didn't start in Jerusalem. Now, many people are at the home of Martha and Mary and Lazarus, consoling them, and they were weeping together, and so Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Okay, and I said that already, but that's an important note. Martha goes out to meet Jesus, and she kind of chides him. She says, "If you had been here, Lazarus would not be dead. But I know whatever you ask of God, he will give it." So, she seems to be exhibiting some extreme faith in Jesus here. She's saying, "Jesus, yeah, I know he's dead, but maybe you can do something." It sounds like she's asking, but not asking direct. I don't know. But Jesus tells her that Jesus will rise again. So he's assuring her. Now, she thinks he's speaking of the afterlife resurrection, that final day. And Jesus tells her, "I am the resurrection and the life." She says, yeah, I know that the resurrection's going to happen, but she was saying, but what about now? And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And then he questions her faith. He says, everyone living and believing into me shall not die to the age. Never. Do you believe this? And she replies, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who comes into the world. Wow. So we see people really believing Jesus to be from God. His efforts are not going unnoticed by the people who are looking for the Messiah. So this was undoubtedly a very emotional exchange. These are personal friends, right, of Jesus. Death has visited the family, and the pain that hangs in the air of that is like a great weight. And after this exchange, Martha goes to get Mary. Okay, 30 through 40. Key words and phrases, I just have Jesus wept. Okay, it's like the shortest verse in the Bible or something, which is whatever, Jesus wept. And this is a very important thing to see because like the Hebrew writer will talk about it later, and even Paul kind of touches on the humanity of Jesus himself as well. But the Hebrew writer really brings that message home. Now here we see Jesus is greeted by Mary, right? She comes out and she says the same accusation as Martha. If you were here, Lazarus would not be dead. And we see that Jesus is moved, okay? Jesus is moved by this. And he witnesses her pain and her weeping, and he's looking around, and he sees all the other people weeping as well. Then Jesus weeps with them. Now, some of the people were assuming that, oh, see how much he loved Lazarus? And others were, they take this opportunity to go, yeah, well, if he would have been here, maybe this wouldn't have happened. He's been able to help blind people and stuff. Why couldn't he help Lazarus when he was sick? So again, Jesus waited so that Lazarus would be gone, so that he could prove who he is. Why is this important? Again, this is the Son of God who has been from before the beginning. Jesus was God. John was adamant out of the gate talking about that. Jesus has seen what sin and Satan has done to his creation for all time. Jesus feels all that sorrow from the ages. He cannot help it. He simply cries. He experiences what everybody else is perceiving as a great loss. And I wouldn't say Jesus never understood it, but now he's understanding it in a very human way. To be clear, now this is not that loud wailing type of crying. When you look up the word, it is a quiet shedding of tears. It was Jesus quietly crying. This had to be very difficult for him. In this moment, God is man. Now, Jesus also groans within himself. That's what the literal version says. It denotes what is known as a snort of indignation. He's not pleased with death and the suffering that has taken place since mankind fell, right? Since mankind's basically been on earth these thousands of years. This is what he came to change. Paul talks about that. Where's the sting, sting of death? Where are you? The sting of sin. It's all gone because Jesus took that away. And what we also see here are the differing opinions of Jesus. Some think that they think well of him, and some of him not so much. They're criticizing him, which is what was happening during the day. Now at the tomb, Jesus tells them, lift away the stone. And they warn, he's been dead 4 days. He will smell, Jesus. It's not going to be pleasant in there. and he chides their unbelief. He says, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you will see the glory of God? Again, Jesus hammering away at the concept of faith. If you don't have faith in Jesus, you don't have a leg to start on. You're not even out of the gate. You're not started. You're not anything until you can understand how to trust him. Okay, 41 through 46. In here, I see the key phrases, believed into him, right? Again, it's about belief. The stone is lifted away, and Jesus prays and calls out to Lazarus, Lazarus, here, outside. That's the literal version of it. Now, Lazarus comes out, still wrapped in his burial clothes. He's all kind of tied up, you know. And Jesus orders that he be unbound. And perhaps that's kind of a metaphor for Jesus freeing his followers from the sting of sin and death. And again, that's what Paul talks about. At that moment, many believed on him. Okay, and it's important to see this. We see that some people are critical of Jesus, but a lot of people are believing on him. And it's important to see that coming up because that plays an important role in how things fall out in this next couple of chapters. So other people felt the need to go report what Jesus was doing to the officials, right? There's always somebody who's like, oh, what's Jesus doing? We need to go talk to, go talk to the people at the temple. Go talk to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They know what to think. Everybody else who's believing on him is going, I don't need to talk to them. I'm looking at God doing something here. This guy's from God. I don't know if he's exactly what's going on, but I see that he's from God. How can I not believe that? They didn't question it. They saw it, and that was what they went with. Okay, 47 through 57. The key phrases and words here are, what are we doing, or what shall we do? This is when the Sanhedrin council gets together. And then, this man does many miraculous signs. Okay, this is a big deal. Now, this section sets up what happens next in the final chapter of the life of Jesus, the man before his execution. And so there's a lot of chapters after that, like 9 chapters that deal with Jesus and the last day and the resurrection period time of his life. But up until now, it's only these 12 chapters that's dedicated to his life. Now, when the officials hear of Jesus' success, raising a dead man, they become concerned, because they don't want to believe in Jesus. They just believe Jesus is an outsider that will rattle the Roman government, and then the Roman government will remove the temple from them and the privileges that they have of limited rule and all of that. They have power and they don't want to give it up. So they gather a Sanhedrin, which is Pharisees and Sadducees, the leaders within the temple compound and priests and all of that. And they gather a Sanhedrin, discuss their concerns. They state, this man is doing all these miracles and people are following him. What are we going to do? Is basically what they say. It's like, well, why don't you just believe him? Because look what he's doing. But no, for all those reasons I said, they don't want to believe. Now, the Roman government selected the high priest. The high priest could be from Levi, but it had to be somebody who was sympathetic to the Roman rule, somebody who just went with the program. And his name was Caiaphas. And he states in the middle of all this, he says, he basically says, be quiet. And he says, it is profitable for us that one man die for the people, and not all the nation to perish. So they're saying, we're worried about the whole nation. And he's saying, sounds like one person's going to die. And we sort of need to read this with a tinge of diabolical doublespeak into this statement. It appears that for the benefit of the people, the Sanhedrin should see to it, and this is what I think he's saying, the Sanhedrin should see to it, these leaders, that Jesus is executed. So this is all setting it up. So thus becomes the motivation and the heart of evil towards Jesus. He is a marked man. He's already been kind of singled out, but now we see a real concerted effort to make sure that Jesus has no more success, right? Jesus has slipped away too many times. I keep talking about that. He slips away. I really think that's the Holy Spirit helping him. Now, little did Caiaphas know, I think, the truth of his prophecy. Jesus would die for all of his people and for all the other people in the world. It becomes a world movement. And I don't think he really understood what he's saying. I think he was just being diabolical and didn't understand that he was actually making a prophecy. Okay, the Passover was nearing, and Jesus makes it his plan to stay off the officials' radar. And he's kind of been doing that already, on and off. We've seen that. Now, it's not quite Passover yet, but the officials take note that Jesus is not around, and they put out the word. They say, anyone seeing him needs to report it to us. Jesus is nearing his time. Okay, so in the next chapter, we see Jesus, during the height of his popularity, enter Jerusalem for Passover. For now, he will be given a hero's welcome. See you in the next one.